All right, in this video, we're going to be reacting to what to do if your inner voice is cruel. Let's get right into it.
I think chatter is one of the big problems we face as a species. We spend between 1/3 and 1/2 of our waking hours not living in the present. And what do we do during that time? We're talking to ourselves. Your inner voice is your ability to silently use language to reflect on your life.
Yeah, I would say that some people may even have multiple voices that speak to them, but I would say, yeah, for sure. Definitely have an inner voice that chats with me or I talk with it. Sometimes I speak out loud to it just so I can actually hear what it's saying, the voice and the head. Let's keep going.
Chatter refers to the dark side of the inner voice. When we turn our attention inward to make sense of our problems, we don't end up finding solutions. We end up ruminating, worrying, catastrophizing. We get stuck in a negative cycle that takes this remarkable tool that we possess, this inner voice, and it turns it into a curse rather than a blessing. My name is Ethan Cross. I'm a professor of psychology and management, and I'm the author of the book Chatter, The Voice in Our Head, Why It Matters, and How to Harness It.
Cool. Let's do this.
In terms of whether
This
there's an
is
evolutionary purpose to the inner voice, many scientists believe that language is a tool that helps us navigate the world. And our ability to use language not only to communicate with others, but to communicate with ourselves provides us with a survival advantage. It's an incredible problem-solving device. At
true.
the most basic,
True, especially if you're able to communicate with others in a very effective way, then you can definitely solve a lot of problems. But I feel like communicating effectively just takes a lot when it comes down to what is common language. I mean, yeah, beyond English, sure, but I think it goes to cultural differences. I think it goes to personal experiences, different perspectives. And I feel like nowadays it's kind of hard to align, or at least for people to listen and to not necessarily, what is it? It's either sympathize or empathize. I forget which one is which, but basically the feeling of trying to understand by their perspective. That's what people have lost. So it'd be nice to get that back, but we have work to do.
end of the spectrum, our inner voice is part of what we call our verbal working memory system. It's a basic feature of the human mind that helps us keep verbal information active in our heads. Our inner voice also lets us simulate and plan. So before a big presentation, I'll go over in my head what I'm going to say. What are the different talking points that I'm going to run through? I'll hear what questions the audience is going to ask me, and then I'll respond in turn. I'm simulating that exchange, and I'm using my inner voice to help me do that. Our inner voice helps us control ourselves. Think about the last time you may have wanted to reach for a treat late at night, but then you think to yourself, don't do it. You'll regret it in the morning. That's your inner voice. And then finally, the inner voice helps us storify our lives. Many of us turn our attention inward to come up with some narrative that explains our experiences in ways that give shape to our understanding of who we are, our identity. So sometimes this inner voice can be an incredible source of help, but at other times,
It could be
can really sink us.
bad. It could be very, very
First, it
bad.
makes it incredibly hard for us to focus. Chatter consumes our attention. Chatter can also create friction in your relationships.
The lack of focus, I feel like that comes from disassociation. When you're in a mid conversation, that inner voice or chatter, I guess in this case, can start to have another conversation with you while there's one actually being said in front of you, and now you're distancing yourself while you're physically there within your own mind because you're talking to yourself in like a off distant place that's not right there where you're actually having a conversation. Like, for instance, if this person here just started to think about whatever it is that she's thinking about, she could start, you know, what am I going to eat later on? Why did I have an argument with so and so earlier? I can't believe that I lost my keys earlier today. Like, so many other thoughts can start going on while you're literally trying to listen to someone right across from you. It's crazy. Disassociation is tough to snap out of sometimes. But let's keep going.
Because you're talking about your problems over and over again and not being a great listener to others. It can also make us more irritable and lead to something called displaced aggression. Finally, we
Hey,
know
wouldn't that man grab you? You ain't even reflected. No, I'm kidding. It's stock video. But still, that man grabbed him and he didn't do nothing.
chatter can have severe negative physical health effects.
Wait, go back.
Negative physical health effects.
Go back one more time.
Also make us more irritable and lead to something called displaced aggression. Finally, we know that chatter can have severe negative physical health effects. You've probably heard that stress kills. That's not exactly true. A stress response is a really adaptive response. What makes stress toxic is when it remains chronically elevated over time. This is precisely what chatter does. We experience a stressor in our life, it then ends, but in our minds, our chatter perpetuates it. We keep
Yeah, so basically, your mind is now forever in a loop. And this could happen in childhood too. Like, this thing could happen when you're very young. And as he said, you know, the event already stopped or it's already happened, but it could be years later where you still are processing that same stress or those same negative inner voices or thoughts or whatever experience you had is just coming back and back. And yeah,
thinking about that event over and over and over again. And that keeps that stress response active in ways that can predict things like cardiovascular disease, chronic inflammation, and even cancer. It's hard to overstate how negative the implications of chatter can be. The good news is there is a science-based toolkit that you can use to regain control of your inner voice. There are things we can do on our own, ways of harnessing our relationships with other people, and even ways of interacting with physical environments. One really great example of these tools are rituals. We love having control. When you experience chatter, you often feel like your thoughts are in control of you. One of the things that we've learned through science is that we can compensate for this feeling out of control by creating order around us. Rituals are one way to do that. A ritual is an ordered sequence of behaviors that you rigidly perform the same way each time. By engaging in the same sequence of behaviors every time the same way, that's giving you a sense of order and control that can feel really good when you're mired in chatter. The tennis great Rafael Nadal, he said the hardest thing that he struggles to do on the tennis court is manage the voices inside his head. He engages in rituals. During breaks between play, he goes over to his bench. First, he takes a sip out of one water bottle, then he takes a sip out of another. Then he puts each water bottle back exactly where he picked them up from, on a diagonal to the court. It's a ritual he does to manage his chatter. There are no...
I feel like there's also other ways too. I mean, rituals is definitely one way, but if you start to learn the patterns that you've developed, and you're able to start thinking of new ones. I mean, a ritual, I guess, would help, but when it comes down to these patterns, though, you do need to have like a new belief or a new way of thinking in order to have these new patterns stick. So if you do start a ritual in this case, you do need to make sure that you're remembering the positive as to why you're doing it. So I guess you can become, a good tennis player in this case, but you can actually, get out of that loop that we were mentioning before, where if you get that pattern, it helps you gain control. But there's still a lot of work that you need to do if that loop is still going around. So if you're still having those inner voices talk to you at times like that, you do need to consult with someone who can help you get through those inner voices and be able to control them. It does take a ritual, but I also think it takes a new belief system and just a new way of thinking. And that can be done with multiple ways, but it does usually take a lot of communication and understanding. And I would say that there's other systems that are available to help you process, stress or traumatic events that you've had earlier and be able to find a healthier way to process them in your inner voice. So,
Individual tools that work for all people in all situations to help manage your chatter. Instead, the real challenge is to figure out what are the unique combinations of tools that work best for you. Are you weaker for experiencing chatter? Absolutely not. You are human for experiencing chatter. So welcome to the human condition.
that was a good video. I'm not going to lie. I would say that, oops. I would say, yeah, if you have an inner voice that's very cruel, you definitely want to address it, because if not, and you let it go for a long time in your life, you're going to see it come into different places of your life, and eventually it can consume everything to the point where you don't even want to live life anymore. So you definitely need to get it addressed. And the thing is that I think everyone has like a fear of judgment of going to somebody to get the help. So that fear of judgment could definitely, it could be a wall for sure, but once you leap over it, you got to realize you're doing it for you, and only you is going to be with you and your own voices. So if you're not comfortable with your own voice, then that should be a concern for you. So definitely get it addressed and talk to somebody. Talk to someone who actually knows how to address it, though. Don't just talk to anybody, because if you talk to the wrong person, you can further the loop, and they can actually increase the amount of like terrible thinking or bad voices or the inner thoughts that you're having. Just they can make them go even more negative if you don't speak to the right person. So definitely take the time to even write down what these thoughts are or whatever your mind's saying. I know I said a little bit earlier too that I actually speak out loud. So when I hear this inner voice, sometimes I actually do say that inner voice out loud, because sometimes just hearing it out in the real world, you'll realize that that doesn't sound right, or that doesn't sound correct, or that should be changed. So I would say that's one way of starting it. And then, of course, starting to write it down. And then, yeah, find someone that can help you address it. Usually it's a licensed professional. So, yeah, peace. That's all I have. Goodbye.